Hello, XCFL. I'm Dick Dickerson. I'm the new podcast host for the XCFL Chargers Bolt Beat. I'm going to take over where Big Al left off, covering weeks 9 through 12, including week 13 as well. Also, we'll talk a little bit about what's going on with the Chargers and the future moving forward. So let's get right to it here in episode 3. First, we're going to talk about the Chargers. They're 86 overall. They're 5-7 on the season right now. They're 22nd ranked offense and 23rd ranked defense in the XCFL. On the offensive side of it, they're 20th in points, 23rd in yards, 24th in passing yards, and 19th in rushing yards. Defensively, they're 17th in points, 27th in yards, 24th in passing yards, and 22nd in rushing yards. This team is not the best offensively or defensively in the XCFL. However, they're not the worst either. Coach Greco has had a bit of a struggle this season, so to speak, compared to last season. Maybe some people have caught on to the scheme. He's trying to change some things up with that. Most recently, in the media, he's called out Watson and told him he's going to take a seat to the backup Hackenberg, which they got last year off of free agency, and has done well for Coach Greco with the Chargers as well as in the Chiefs in Coach Greco's previous coaching career in the XCFL last season. Moving on from this, we're going to go ahead and talk about the schedule. Weeks 9 through 12 featured the Broncos, the Ravens, the Raiders, and the Chiefs. Week 13 also included the Jaguars. We'll go ahead and take a look at the standings in the AFC West as they stood as of Week 12. First up, the host team, the Chargers. They're 5-7 with a 417 win percentage, which is obviously under 500. 21 points for, 25 points against. They're 2-4 on a home record and 3-3 on the road. 3-2 in the division and 4-5 in the conference. The Raiders are 8-4 with a winning percentage of .667. They have 29 points for, 19 points against. They're 3-3 at home, an impressive 5-1 on the road. Another impressive feat, 4-0 in the division. Conference-wise, they're 6-2. So they're holding their own in the AFC as well as the AFC West. The Broncos, who've had a little bit of turnover, but most recently have breathed some life into the defense with the new owner and new coaching staff that they have with the Broncos. They're currently 7-5, who've turned this team around from not looking at a playoff position to possibly sneaking into the wild card spot or possibly maybe taking the division. With just over a 500 winning percentage at .583, they have 20 points for and 19 points against. Of course, not all to the current owner, as he's done well for them recently, as I just mentioned. They're 4-2 at home, 3-3 on the road, 3-3 in the division, and 5-4 in the conference. This leads us to the bottom of the barrel, the Chiefs. The Chiefs also have a new owner most recently, which they found a new face but an old face in Nick Z. Don't be surprised what you see next season isn't what you saw this season. Keep that in mind. Nick Z is a previous XCFL Super Bowl champion. He's got a great win record. He's a great owner. He's a good sim player. So these stats here don't reflect how he is. Of course, the Chiefs currently at Week 12 are 0-12 with a 0 win percentage, 11 points for, 34 points against, 0-6 at home and on the road, 0-5 in the division, and 0-9 in the conference. Next, we're going to go ahead and talk about the recap. So we'll go ahead and bring that up here in just a moment. We'll be right back. All right, let's take a look back at weeks 9 through 12, also including week 13, Starting with week 9, the Chargers were on the road and they traveled to division rival the Broncos. Watson was 11 of 18 for 165 yards, had 1 touchdown and threw 2 interceptions. Interceptions seems to be this guy's MO this season, and that could be what's taking the toll on Coach Greco since last season after he came back from injury when they had to pick up Hackenberg. Gordon had 12 carries on the ground for 82 yards but 0 touchdowns. Williams grabbed 3 receptions for 86 yards and 1 touchdown. And McKinney had 3 tackles, one of those for a sack. Quarterback for the Broncos, Dobbs, was 14 of 20 for 219 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and threw 1 interception. Lane had 14 carries on the ground for 50 yards and 1 touchdown. Butt had 4 receptions for 86 yards and 0 touchdowns. And Von Miller had 5 tackles. 4 of those were for a sack, and 1 of them was a forced fumble. Needless to say, Von Miller was the defensive player of this game, and the Broncos took the victory 28-7. In Week 10, which started the homestand for the Chargers, the Ravens came in to visit the Chargers out in L.A. Luck was 16 of 19 for 223 yards, had 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Halfback Perry had 15 carries on the ground for 82 yards and 0 touchdowns. Bullard had 4 receptions, 54 yards, and 1 touchdown. On the defense, Young had 4 tackles and 1 interception. Watson was 14 of 22 for 218 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Again, another day with 2 interceptions with Watson. I would be shocked if this guy's not leading the league in interceptions. Gordon has 17 rushes for 51 yards and 0 touchdowns. It just doesn't seem like they can get this guy going this year, as he was the 5th leading rusher in the XCFL last season at season's end. Williams had 6 receptions for 112 yards and 1 touchdown. Sherman had 4 tackles, 1 of those for an interception. The final in this one, the Ravens win it 27-13. Week 11, another divisional game with the Raiders. They come into LA to host the Chargers. Carr was 5 of 10 for 92 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. Halfback Jackson had 18 carries for 204 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had himself a day against this Chargers defense. Cooper had 2 receptions for 49 yards, but did manage 1 touchdown. And Mealy on the defense for the Oakland Raiders had 3 tackles and 2 interceptions. Watson was 17 of 26 for 208 yards, had 1 touchdown, and throws 4 interceptions. That's 8 interceptions in the last 3 games I just recapped, and we're in Week 11. I need to look at these stats to see where this guy's going with this, which would probably explain why he's going to be on the bench for the rest of the season, which we'll talk about that later. Gordon had 14 carries for only 48 yards and no touchdowns. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this guy is just not getting the ball down the field for the Chargers, which is hurting them. Ross had 4 receptions for 49 yards and managed 1 touchdown. Cox had 2 tackles and 1 forced fumble. In this game, the Raiders come out victorious 31-16. In Week 12, another divisional game, the Chiefs come into town against the Chargers. This one is a little bit different of an outcome. The Chargers picked up the victory in this one 35-28, which was a close-fought game for new owner and coach Nick Z. Mahomes has 23 of 41 for 386 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Pruitt, the halfback, had 9 carries for 45 yards and 1 touchdown. Sprinkle had 4 receptions for 118 yards and 1 touchdown. And Peters had 2 tackles as well as 2 interceptions. He was a big part of the Chiefs' defense in this one. Watson finds himself 14 of 22, just shy of 300 yards with 294 yards. Does manage to have more touchdowns than interceptions this game with 3 touchdowns, but does throw 2 interceptions. Gordon had 18 carries on the ground for 85 yards, finally seeing some effort in him. He also picks up 2 touchdowns on the ground as well. And Ross has another game for 4 receptions, 167 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Jordan, the old man on the end, had 5 tackles, 2 of those for sacks. The Chargers look like the old Chargers in this one, and like I mentioned, they picked up the victory 35-28. Last week, Week 13. This was against the Chargers and owner Dan the Man. Richie comes in, the rookie, I believe, at 13 of 17 for 207 yards. He had 1 touchdown and did not throw any interceptions. Fournette, the leading rusher in the XCFL, who's been a powerhouse since he's gotten here, has 19 carries for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. Ingram has 3 receptions for 64 yards and 1 touchdown, and Dexter, on defense for the Jaguars, had 3 tackles, which were all sacks. For the Chargers, Watson was 13 of 21 for 140 yards, 0 touchdowns, and of course, 1 interception. Wilson, on the ground, had 4 carries for 68 yards and 1 touchdown. I believe majority of those yards were on that 1 touchdown. Gordon went down in this one with some chest pain, but was able to return in Week 14, which we'll talk about in the next Bolt Beat against the Raiders. Williams managed to grab 5 balls in the air for 84 yards, but did not find the end zone with 0 touchdowns. Bosa wakes himself up on defense finally this season and gets 5 tackles, 1 of them for a sack. So that's going to conclude everything for the Bolt Beat this week, which covered 9 through 12. We're going to go ahead and talk just a little bit about what's going on currently with the Chargers. As you know, Watson is going to be on the bench. Hackenberg is going to come in and take over. I would not be surprised if we didn't see Bowden in there. I foresee Greco giving him some chances to play since he's a rookie, get him some playing time. Of course, he's going to see some of that next season come preseason, and hopefully Watson and Greco could get on the same page in the offseason. Mentioning the offseason for the Chargers, that's going to be big for them since they didn't really have a big offseason last year. They didn't have many draft picks as they were traded away, and with the salary cap and the way the contracts were structured with the former ownership of this team, owner Al Ferreira Sr. is finding himself learning how to balance a financial sheet again and get this team back in order. We still got some time left in this cycle to turn things around and get it going. We'll see how things go. That's everything that we have this week for the Bolt Beat. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up with the next one, which will take care of the rest of the games that we have on the schedule. The rest of those games include, as I mentioned, the Raiders, the Bills, the Giants, and finishing up with the Browns at the end of the season. So the next time you'll hear from me will be on the last part of the podcast for the season, which will be the season-ending recap of everything that we've gone on for the Chargers this year. So I'm happy to be back. Dick Dickerson signing out.